Hey everybody, and welcome to your route to IT career success. I am thrilled to have you joining us today for what's going to be sort of a unique webcast for me. Normally when we hop on these webcasts, we're diving deep into some technical topic, and we will get technical on a few things today. I won't be able to help myself from that, but primarily this is about your career. I want you to come out of this session today with a much more clear idea of where you want your IT career to progress. We're actually going to do some work in class today to help you clarify that. I want you to come out of today knowing exactly what your next step is to get to that career, that destination out there somewhere. So I am just super excited for what's going to happen to you after attending this webcast. And there's going to be a lot of interactivity, so please be sure and be chatting back and forth with me. But let me let you know that as I'm doing this solo. I don't have somebody moderating the chats right now, so it's just me. So please don't be offended if I don't answer your question right away. We will take several Q&A breaks throughout today's session. So just hang on to those questions if you would, and we'll give you plenty of Q&A breaks to ask whatever is on your mind. But let's jump right into it, shall we? Here is the agenda. We're going to begin today by talking about career goal setting. Now, I know when I say goal setting, that just turns a lot of people off. They think, oh, please don't talk about goal setting again. But we're going to put a twist on it. I think you're going to enjoy it. We're actually going to do some work in class regarding goal setting. We're also going to talk about strategies for getting that dream job. You think, oh, I'd really like to work for company X. But to do that, you've got to have a killer resume. You've got to really shine in the interview. And we'll talk about how to find those job openings out there. And I'll give you some good news right now. There are a bunch of job openings, many of which are remote. I hope you come out of today realizing how easy it's going to be to find a job, and you can cherry pick and select a set of companies that maybe you want to work for, a set of specific jobs, and we'll talk about how to really shine in that interview. We'll also talk about starting your own IT consulting company. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, one of the a paradox that many people have going into this industry is they go to the interview and the interviewer says, all right, what experience do you have? Well, I don't have any experience. Well, we're looking for somebody with experience. And that's the paradox. How do you get experience without getting a job? And you cannot get a job without getting experience. So we'll talk about how to break that paradox today and give you some ideas about how to get experience. For example, by starting your own company. It doesn't have to be full-time. We'll talk about that. But you could give your own you could give yourself experience through your own company. You could volunteer. We'll give you some ideas around those. And I want to talk about exam preparation strategies because I really want you to come out of this realizing that something that's going to give you a competitive advantage out in the marketplace is having a good collection of certifications. And a lot of people get really intimidated when they go take those certification exams. So I want to give you my best exam preparation strategies. And we'll talk about time management because you've got all these great goals. You know what you're going to be doing. But sometimes, have you ever heard somebody say, oh, I just don't have time to study for this. I just don't have time to work on this particular skill. I want to give you some time management tips as we go through. And one of the most common questions I get is Kevin, how or which field should I go into? I mean, we've got wireless, we've got data center, we've got automation. What should I do? Well, I'm going to give you some statistics from this year and help you make your decision or give you some information to make your decision. Now, I don't want you to do something that you have zero interest in. That's not going to help anybody. But I want to give you sort of a ranking of what's hot out there and what exams are hot out there right now. So as you think about what you're going to be doing in the next year, you'll maybe be able to glean some wisdom from those two lists I'm going to give you. I'll give you a list of the most in-demand skills and the most in-demand certifications right now. So I think you'll really find that valuable. And as we always do, we will do some Q&A with you. All right, if you've not heard of me before, if you just kind of stumbled upon this webcast, my name is Kevin Wallace. Been doing this for quite a while. I've got a couple of CCIEs, one in enterprise infrastructure, one in collaboration, and I've been working with Cisco gear since 1989. Yes, Cisco had gear back in 1989. I worked with the original Cisco router, the old AGS Plus router. Anybody know the old AGS Plus router? If we have any people that have been in the industry about 30 years or so. I taught a bunch of courses for Cisco Learning Partners, did that for about 14 years. And really my favorite job, other than running my own company, my favorite job in the marketplace, working for someone else, was Walt Disney World. My family and I, we are massive, massive Disney fans. It just occurred to me, I think I'm wearing a Disney logoed, a Disney Cruise Line shirt with you right now. And in my classes, we tell a lot of tales of the trenches of when I was a network designer down at Walt Disney World. And by the way, that was the largest single-site employer in North America, so it was a massive, massive network I got to play around with. I've written a bunch of books, done a lot of videos for the folks over at Cisco Press. I was honored to speak a couple of times at Cisco Live, each time getting the Distinguished Speaker Certificate or the award. Bottom line is, that's enough about me. I'm passionate about this stuff. I cannot wait to share it with you. And let's get right into it by talking about career goal setting. And again, I realize that the term goal setting almost seems overused sometimes. Oh yeah, I've done goal setting. We did that a couple of years ago. When's the last time you looked at those goals? Do you keep them in front of you on a daily basis? I prefer, instead of saying goal setting, I prefer to say, we're about to do destiny design. I mean, think about it. That's really what it is. We are designing our destiny. Where do you want to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? We're going to be getting into that. Now, I'm going to start with the traditional goal setting model, but stay with me. We're going to tweak it a little bit, all right? You might have heard of the SMART goal setting model. You want goals that are smart. In other words, they should be specific. They should be something that's measurable. They should be attainable. They should be realistic and time-bound. Now, what that means is specific means this is exactly what I want to do. I don't want to just study networking. I want to get my CCNP, for example. Measurable means that, yeah, once I get that certification, that's something tangible. That's measurable. Now, a lot of people get tripped up with the difference between attainable and realistic, because if something is realistic, isn't it therefore attainable? Here's the difference with the SMART goal setting model. If something is attainable, that means that you have the skills, the drive, the background, the resources to attain that goal. Realistic means, is it realistic based on your life's direction right now? Is it something that would be appropriate for your current set of goals? Would it be a realistic thing to spend time on, in other words? Even though it might be attainable, you could do it. For example, a data center. I'll give you that example because out of all the different Cisco tracks, personal confession, I mean, lots of love to the data center folks. It's not my journey. I really am not super excited about data center. So I've even got a data center certification. I've taught data center. It's just not my passion. So it might not be realistic for me, even though, yeah, it's attainable. I think I could do it. Just don't really want to do it. So it wouldn't be realistic. And time bound, maybe I set a goal to say, I'm going to do it by July 2022 as an example. Now that's the traditional SMART model. Let's build on this. One of my favorite authors in this area is Michael Hyatt, and he has a great book. I don't know how many times I've been through it, honestly. It's something I kind of look to at the beginning of a year. It's called Your Best Year Ever. I mean, I would recommend, if you've got Kindle or something like that, I'd recommend picking that up from Michael Hyatt, Your Best Year Ever. Instead of a SMART goal, he talks about smarter goals. SMART and then ER. The first thing he does, he redefines the R in SMART from realistic to risky. We have to realize that success lies just, here's our comfort zone. Success lies just outside, unfortunately, of that comfort zone. Is it something risky? In other words, is it something that's going to push your ability? It might not push my ability to go get the Network Plus certification right now, But if I wanted to go get a CCIE in another track, yeah, that would be risky. That would be challenging to me. So first of all, he changes that R to risky, and the E stands for, is it exciting? It's like that data center example I gave you. Yeah, I could probably do it, but I'm not excited about it. You don't want to say, based on some of the stats I give you today, that oh yeah, it looks like this is super popular in the industry, I'm going to go after that, but it's not a field you're particularly passionate about. If it's not exciting for you, it's probably not the right goal for you. And finally, he talks about it being relevant. Now, this is going back to, is it relevant? Does it fit in with our current career path right now or not? And if it doesn't, even though, yes, you could do it, you could measure it, you could specify it, you've got the talent, it would push you, but if it doesn't really fit into your career direction, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, then maybe that's not the goal for you. So I love Michael Hyatt's, I call it Destiny Design, but his smarter goal setting model. Really recommend you go pick up Your Best Year Ever. Start reading that before the first of the year would be my recommendation. And before I have you do a little work in class today, I want to just give you some evidence that this stuff really works. I used to keep hardbound journals for years. They look something like this. Here's one of my more recent journals I have. This one is from Brendan Bouchard. This is the High Performance Planner, and I've got a bunch of these. We'll be talking about this a little bit later today, but I went back and looked through some of my journals from years and years ago, and I thought, I want to see where I set these goals and see how long it took me to achieve them, and did I achieve them? And this is going to hopefully prove to you that, yeah, this stuff works. If you create the future in advance, if you put it in your mind in advance, this stuff is really doable. So let me give you some real examples. Back in 2002, I decided that I wanted to write a book on Cisco technologies. I wanted to write for Cisco Press. And I'd never done anything like that before. So I thought, okay, let's see if I can make some contacts in the industry, contact the right people, give them a sample of my writing. But that was a goal that I had, and I focused on that. And just less than, actually over a year later, about almost 2 full years later, I came out with my first Cisco Press book. And here it is. I bet you cannot find this anywhere right now on Amazon. This is a book that I co-wrote with my great friend Anthony Sequeira. It's the CCDA CCDP flashcards from a really, really old design exam. Another goal that I had that came to fruition was in 2005, I said, I want to earn my CCIE in voice. It wasn't because I had some big career plan, like if I do this, then I'm going to be able to get this job. No, I just really wanted it. Have you ever had a goal where you just really wanted it? You couldn't really articulate why you wanted it? Now personally, just as a side note, I know we've got people of lots of different faiths here in our group. Personally, I'm a Christian, and I believe that when I have a passion to do something, that comes from somewhere. If you think about the word desire in its Latin roots means sire. Like here in Kentucky, we have lots of horses, and we talk about who is the sire, who is the father of a horse. You trace the bloodline. So sire really means of the father, is what desire means. So my personal belief, might not be yours, I believe if I've got a burning desire for something, I think that desire came from somewhere. And I think if it came from somewhere, then I'm going to have the ability to carry it out. So I got this desire. I remember talking to my wife about it, saying, all right, this is going to take some time, and it's going to take some time away from the family, but I can't explain it. I just really, really wanted it. People ask me, how do I know if I should go for the CCA? And my answer is, you'll know. You'll know. You'll have that burning desire. And this one took a while. I got going, and then stuff happened, and it took me a while to get back to it. I did it. It was much, much later, but I finally got my CCA voice in 2012. So that was, didn't give up on it. I just sort of pushed pause for a while. Then in 2009, I thought, okay, I want to write a book for Cisco Press, but not some study guide on some old exam. I want to do something like in the core, something like an NP book. And I was able to, in 2010, come out with this book. This is the Cisco Press CCNP T-Shoot book. So that got that desire. In fact, I don't have this listed on screen, but I was thinking about this morning. I remember years ago, I was on my treadmill, and I was thinking about this book I wanted to write. And nobody at Cisco Press said, hey, can you write this book for us? It was a brand new idea. And I looked over my bookshelf, and I wanted to write a book on the fundamentals of voice over IP. And again, nobody asked me to do that. It's just something I thought I really wanted to do. And I was walking or jogging on the treadmill, and I stared at that bookshelf. And I just pictured in my mind, I pictured that book. I pictured the red color of the book and everything. I saw that book sitting on the bookshelf. And months later, I was able to come out with the Voice over IP First Step book from Cisco Press. So it's all about seeing things in advance. Here's one more for you. And that's in 2014. In June 2014, I decided to do this full time, to have my own training company, create my own content, do live trainings like this. And I was able to do that a little bit later that year. So this stuff does work. Now, those are personal examples. I want to give you some fun other examples from people you may have heard of. Anybody a big fan of Hamilton that is on Disney Plus, or maybe you've seen the play? But Lin-Manuel Miranda, I think he is just a genius in writing Hamilton and some of the other things he's done. But check this tweet out that he made back in 2009. It said, spent the entire day working on one couplet about George Washington. Now, a couplet, that's two lines that rhyme with each other. It said, Hamilton is slow going, but it will be worth it. Let's see. It's slow going, my friends, but I promise you it will be worth it. It's slow going, but it will be worth it. Now, Lin-Manuel Miranda knew way back in 2009 that he had to put in the work, but he knew in the end it was going to be worth it. And now it's just an amazing, amazing play. And if you haven't seen that, and if you have Disney Plus, I really recommend you go check out Hamilton. The songs will be stuck in your head. Well, they're still stuck in my head, so I don't know if that ever ends or not, but it's pretty awesome. If you're into music, you might know Ed Sheeran. Here's a tweet from him back in 2011. He said, "Give me a few years. I've got some big plans." 2011, I'd not heard of him back then. I heard of him very shortly after that, but he had plans way back then. He saw in advance where he was going to go. And I want to do one more example because I'm a big Disney person. Before I want you to do some work on this on your own. Now, back in 1982, they didn't have Twitter. So I'm not able to show you tweetable evidence of this one. But Epcot opened in 1982. And Walt Disney, he had already put a lot of thought into that ahead of time. He had done some of the initial planning. Walt Disney passed away in 1966, but he'd already done a lot of the work for the Magic Kingdom and Epcot down at Walt Disney World in Florida. And it opened in 1982, and he had passed away. His brother Roy had passed away, but his nephew, Roy E. Disney, the brother was Roy O., the nephew was Roy E., but Roy E. Disney, he was still playing a big part of the organization. And the day Epcot opened, and by the way, this is a picture that I personally took. I thought that came out really good. I wanted to show it to you. I was down there just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they got it all decorated for the 50th anniversary for Christmas, and wow. 50th anniversary for the Magic Kingdom, but beautiful picture. But when this came out, or when it opened, the story goes that there was a newspaper reporter there, and he was talking to Roy E. Disney, and he was talking about how spectacular Epcot was. And he said, yeah, it's just too bad that Walt never saw this. And I love what Roy said. He said, Walt saw it. That's why you get to see it. So my question for you is, what do you see? What do you see for your future? Go ahead and get some pen and paper, or maybe open up a document on your computer. We're going to go through a little bit of an exercise together. And the first thing, I want us to just dream for a moment. I want you to think about where you want your career to be in 5 years. Do you want to be a network engineer for a particular type of company? Do you want to be in business for yourself? Do you want to have 2 CCIEs? I want you to think about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on some music. Let me back up here. I want to put on some music, and I want you to take about a minute and think about it. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, you might have lots of goals. You might want to have a family. You might want to live on the ocean. There might be lots of things, but give me your number one career goal, if you would. And let me put on some music here, and we'll be back in 1 minute. And when you get it, go ahead and chat it in. If you don't mind me sharing it with the group, go ahead and chat in your number one goal for the year. I'll see you back in 1 minute. Let's take a look at what everybody's saying here. Lamin, L-A-M-I-N, said, my number one goal is to have a CCIE. Now, that's a very worthy goal. I'd want you to be specific and know what track of a CCIE that you want on, that you want to get. And we're going to discuss this toward the end today, that it's really going to take a toll on your life. It's going to impact you physically, emotionally. It's going to impact your relationships because there's such focused dedication. I want to make sure that you really know it's for you. And we'll talk more about that. Let's see. Somebody wants to become a system engineer. They've already booked their CCNA, and they're planning on learning Python coming up. That's excellent. Nayar, N-A-Y-Y-A-R, is they want to be a network consultant. Let's see. Sandro says consulting in the Internet of Things engineering space. That sounds like a lot of fun. And I keep looking around because right now we're on YouTube and we're on Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, and we're on my own website. So I've got a lot of different portals here. Let's see. Somebody's saying, how do I get experience? We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. All right. Let's take that and take it to the next step. So you've got your number one career goal for the next 5 years. The second thing I want you to do, and we're not going to go through a full goal setting workshop today, but the next thing I want you to do is to spend a minute. Actually, let's spend a couple of minutes thinking about the steps it's going to take to get there. Let me advance my slide here. Whoop. Sorry about that. Went to the wrong slide. There we go. The next thing we want to do is something called future pacing. It's connecting the dots of how you're going to get to that in 5 years. Now, 5 years from now, you'll be able to look back at today and think, oh, well, here's how I got here. I had to do this, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. I love the commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave, where he was talking about you're not able to see the dots in the future. You can only look back in the past and connect the dots. You can see how things came to be where you are now. But he said, we just have to have faith that the dots are going to connect in the future. So I want you to think about, you're 5 years ahead of where we are right now. I want you to spend 2 minutes, and I want you to write down 3 short-term goals that would lead to that long-term goal. And just put those in the chat if you would. Number them 1, 2, and 3. For example, if you're going after your CCIE, let's say it's your CCIE in enterprise infrastructure. Maybe your first short-term goal is, well, you've got to pass the Encore exam because that's the qualification exam for the CCIE lab. So maybe that's your first short-term goal, get the Encore exam passed. Then next, you might identify how you're going to get practice gear. Are you going to do a lab rental? Are you going to buy your own equipment from eBay? Are you going to borrow some from your employer? And thirdly, maybe it's to schedule out and dedicate some time. Whatever it is, think about those short-term goals that's going to help you reach that main long-term goal. And I've already talked for a bit, so I'll tell you what, I'll give you about 90 seconds to jot all that down if you would. I'll see you back in about 90 seconds. Just number them if you would in chat, 1, 2, and 3. What short-term goals do you have to get to that 5-year goal? I will see you back in about 90 seconds. I'm seeing some great answers come in. Let's see, Tesia saying, number 1, I want to learn how to analyze data. Number 2, learn how to process and learn the process to make things better. Step number 3, work on the 6 Sigma cert. That sounds pretty cool. Let's see, somebody else say they've already got they're listing out some of the certifications they want to do as their different steps. I won't take time. You can see them in chat as well as I can. But now that you've got your 3 steps, that's going to, the big steps, or the big rocks, as Stephen Covey would say, to get you to that goal. We're not going to take time to do it on all these, but I do want us to think about what's something you could do right away to start making progress towards that first short-term goal. So I want you to determine your next step. Here's what I want you to do. For about 1 more minute, I want you to think, what is your next step? So I saw somebody Philip said, my next step is to earn CCNP Encore. All right, Philip, I want you in the next minute, and everybody else with their goals, for that first short-term goal, tell me step number 1. What are you going to do today? What are you going to do tomorrow? Are you going to buy a book? Are you going to watch some videos on YouTube? Are you going to invest in a course? What are you going to do? Are you going to get some lab gear together? Think about what you're going to be doing. All right, I'll give you about 1 minute, and then we will move on with our goals firmly in place. We'll see you back in about 1 minute. All right, again, we got some great responses coming in. One person's going to build some labs on Cisco Modeling Labs and Packet Tracer. Somebody's going to go through the Encore course. Somebody's going to send out an application for a job they have their eye on. They're going to do that tomorrow. That is awesome. Now, what we've done here is we started you on this process. I don't want to spend the entire time today going through a full goal setting workshop, but I think I've kind of given you the structure of it. I want your goals to be smarter using Michael Hyatt's formula. And I want you to think about where you want to be in 5 years. And that's just one goal. I would come up with a few goals, like 4 or 5 goals. You don't want too many because that gets overwhelming and your efforts get diluted. But come up with about 4 or 5 goals career-wise. In addition to that, you might want to set a personal goal, a physical goal, a financial goal. But come up with maybe 4 or so career goals, and then start working through and saying, what do I need to do to get there? And think about your next step. It's always like I've heard that when I'm driving in my car at night, like if I'm going to the airport late at night, it's about an hour and a half drive from where I am to the airport. And as I'm headed out in the dark, I cannot see all the way to the airport, but I've got the lights on my vehicle, and it shines out, I don't know, maybe 100 feet. And I cannot see past that. But when I drive that 100 feet, suddenly I'm able to see the next 100 feet and the next 100 feet. You've got to have faith that once you take that next step, the next step is going to be obvious. It's kind of like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You've got to have faith to take that step. So spend some time on this. I would encourage you right now, while I'm talking even, to go into your calendar and block out a chunk of time, maybe an hour, sometime during the next week. Block out an hour, schedule it. Say, nope, I've got an appointment. It's an appointment with yourself to go through this entire goal-setting workshop. But I wanted us to at least get started today identifying your goals. And the challenge with goal setting is a lot of people set their goals at the beginning of the year, and they forget about them until next year. You've got to keep your eye on them. Being consistent in reviewing them is key. So here's what I do personally. Now I'm not perfect at these things I'm going to tell you. I'm flawed like everybody else. I'm not perfect, but here's what I strive to do. I try to do a weekly check-in every Sunday. And during that weekly check-in, I can review my previous week and think about, all right, here were some things that I'll learn from the week. That didn't go so well. Here's what I'm going to do next time. Just think back over your learnings of the previous week, if you would. And what I do electronically now, I used to do it in this planner, is rate myself in different life areas. Like here in the high performance planner, we've got life areas like health, mental, partner, family, friends, mission, experiences, spirit, finances, learning. And what I would do on paper, and now, like I say, I've got it in something called Notion is the app I use for that. I can rate myself, and I can write down one thing that I can do in the next week to improve in all those life areas. If I'm 2 or 3 weeks in and my relationship is really low, my relationships with others, that's a warning sign. That means I need to spend more focus there. So think about one thing you could do in the following week to make each of those areas better. And when I'm planning out my week, what I normally do is I will take just a few minutes to brainstorm. I'll think, okay, I got to do this. And it's everything. I got to take the car in to get the oil changed. I got to get a haircut. I've got to do this webcast. I got to make these slides for the new class we're developing. Everything. Just get it out of your head. Dump it into paper. I use an app, and I'll tell you what that app is a little bit later. But I dump all those things into what I call an inbox. It's just a collection of everything I can think of. It's not organized yet. It's just sitting there in the inbox. And then what I do with my app, and I'll give you some different apps that you might want to consider. I go into my app and I put them in a particular day for that upcoming week. I'm like, all right, on Monday I can do this. This is going to have to be done first. I'll put this to Tuesday. And by spreading it out through the week, I can say, whoa, Thursday looks a little bit overloaded. Let's see if I can put some of that on Wednesday, some of that on Friday. And I plan out and I kind of spread out all the responsibilities I have for the week. It allows me to go into Monday with a lot less stress because I have an idea of what I'm going to be doing each day. And usually, I mean, there's always exceptions. Usually, I'm at least 90% successful, if not more, in meeting all those things that I said I wanted to do that day. So you get that feeling of productivity. Now, some people, I love to check things off. And it gives me great satisfaction to say I did this. In fact, personal confession, this is embarrassing, but I'll tell you anyway. I've actually done this before. I will do something that I forgot to put on my to-do list, and I'll go back and write it on my to-do list just so I can have the satisfaction of checking it off. That's probably not normal. I don't think you need to do that, but I love going through and feeling that feeling of satisfaction. And that's what I do at the beginning of a week on Sunday. But then I have a daily ritual. I like to start off my day in a certain way. I've got my little daily time. I get up, like this morning, got up at 5 a.m., and my challenge to you, and it is a challenge, my friends, I'll tell you, it is for me, don't check your email for the first hour of the day. I love what Brendan Bouchard says about that. He says, email is a convenient organizing system of other people's agendas. That's really what it is. Give yourself the gift of the first hour of your day without thinking about what other people want you to do. So stay away from that email if you can for the first hour of the day. I used to recommend 4 hours, then I realized I cannot do that myself. So I backed it off. Give yourself the first hour of the day. Don't check email, and read something positive. You might have some sort of personal development book you're reading, or I'll do a devotional. I'll read my Bible, something like that, and then spend some quiet time. You might want to meditate, however you want to do that. There's lots of books and YouTube videos on meditation. You might want to spend some time in prayer. That's typically what I do, and then you want to move. Now here, I mean, I get on the treadmill. And I did a 5K on the treadmill this morning, as an example, just to kind of get the blood flowing. And for some people, they don't have time for that. At least do 5 minutes of stretching, just kind of get the blood flowing, get the body activated. And what I like to do is when I'm on the treadmill, I've got an iPad I put in front of me, and I watch training videos. I try to learn something every time I'm on the treadmill. And well, this morning I got a little distracted. This morning I started watching the new Hawkeye series on Disney Plus, but I did watch a little bit. I did watch a little bit of a training video before I watched Hawkeye. And then, before you get into the day, just kind of look over your to-dos that you made on Sunday and think about What's it going to feel like to accomplish those? How would your best self show up to accomplish this and this and this? Sometimes, and one that I didn't write down here, sometimes I'll ask myself, what is the biggest challenge that might come up today? Yeah, I got that meeting. It's going to be a little tense because we're in disagreement about this. How would my best self handle that? And I picture how my best self would handle that potential issue that might come up. So by having some time for yourself, giving yourself the gift of an hour of a morning, for me, it makes all the difference. So that, my friends, is a look at career goal setting. Next up, we want to talk about some strategies for landing your dream job. And that's going to involve things like finding that job, really standing out in an interview, your resume. But first, let's talk about some strategies for finding jobs out there. Now, there are certainly some job boards. Some of the big ones are Indeed.com. That's the one I would probably point you to first. Monster Dice. We'll talk about Upwork a little bit later. It's kind of cool. We'll get into that. I'll demonstrate Upwork for you. But let's just go out live right now and take a look at the Indeed website. Or I think I've got that pulled up here. Yeah, on the Indeed website. Let's say I want to search for a job that requires CCNP certification, and I'm in Richmond, Kentucky. Not really a hotbed of IT, but I don't know. Let's see. Can I get a job around here, or maybe even remote? Let's take a look. It says, yeah, just up the road from me, they want a system engineer that pays up to $80,000. Well, that's cool. Lockheed Martin, about 25 minutes from where I live. They want a systems network manager with Cisco CCNP. Another one in Lexington. Now, this is in the middle of Kentucky, folks. So there are jobs out there. There is no doubt about it. And I want to help you in this session be able to get one of those jobs. I'll tell you my favorite place to point people to go look for jobs, though. It's LinkedIn. Now, I have the LinkedIn premium membership. I don't know exactly what's included in that versus the free membership, but I got the premium membership, so maybe some stuff I'm going to do you cannot do with the free one. I'm not sure what's included or not, but during your job search, I think it's worth upgrading. But let me take you out to LinkedIn really quick, and let's just take a look at how easy it is to find some really awesome jobs. Let's go out to LinkedIn. And here's just my normal page I get when logging into LinkedIn. And let's say that I want to, let's say I've got my CCNP because I took Kevin's Encore and Anarsi master classes. I got my CCNP, and I'd like to get a job. I don't really live close to like a big city or something, maybe even in another country, but I want to work remotely. I mean, after COVID last year, there's a lot of opportunities for working remotely. So let's go up, and I'm going to click on jobs up at the top here. And for the title, I'm just going to put in CCNP as the certification. And for the location, I'm just going to say remote. That's now a valid location. Look at all this. We got over 25,000 results matching CCNP and remote. See, this one is remote. Let's see, senior collaboration engineer, remote. Lots and lots of different companies allow you to work remotely. That is pretty amazing. Let's say that we're curious about what kind of salary we'll get for a job in a particular city. Let me go back here. Let's say that I want to go to, I'm considering moving to San Diego, we'll say. Let's see if I can get back. And I'm going to click on salary, and I'll say, I wonder what a network engineer might make in San Diego. So I can type in San Diego, California, search. And it says, all right, in California, it's going to be an average, or in San Diego, it's going to be an average of just under 90K for a network engineer, and they tell you different companies and what their average pay is. Wow, You go in, it looks like Cisco's paying like 116,000 a year for a network engineer. Or maybe you want to work for a specific company and you want to see what jobs they have available. I mean, when I used to be a network designer down at Walt Disney World, I looked specifically, I went to the Disney website to say, all right, what kind of jobs do they have available in networking? And I was able to find a job. But here it's going to be even easier. You remember just like maybe a month ago or so, Facebook said we're changing our name to Meta, and they're doing the whole, they're part of the big metaverse movement. Well, let's say that I want to work for, I don't, but let's say I wanted to work for Meta. I could type that in, and it's going to tell me all these different jobs for Meta. There's over 10,000 open jobs for Meta. Let's say I want to do it remotely. I want to work for them, but I don't want to move. Meta remote. Got over 1,100 jobs working for Meta remotely. How about that? That's amazing. Jobs are out there, my friends. You can do this. There are plenty of jobs out there, and thanks to the interwebs, they are now extremely easy to find using tools like LinkedIn. And we're not done. I'll get to some other ones later. Now let's talk about your resume. This is one of the biggest stumbling blocks that I've seen candidates have when they're trying to get a job. They just have a really bad resume. So let me give you some of my tips. Again, this is not theoretical. I've done a lot of interviewing to hire people, and I've read a lot of resumes, and some of them it just makes you want to roll your eyes how bad they are. So let me give you some of my big tips. Number one, be brief. Now, it's a temptation to not do this. Some people want to make sure they need to know how qualified I am. I got to tell them everything I've ever done. I was an Eagle Scout, which is awesome, by the way, but maybe not relevant to the job that you're going after. Be brief. I've seen 3-page resumes that I don't want to read a 3-page resume. Give me a highlight reel. Give me a highlight reel on 1 page. I always say try to fit it to 1 page. And don't go to a 5-point font to do that. Make it readable and fit it to 1 page. And focus on your results. Some people focus mainly on their accomplishments, like I won some award or I worked at this company. Well, those are fine. You can bring those up in the interview, but focus on what you actually did. Like I designed the rollout of a 500 workstation local area network with 15 wireless access points, something like that. What have you done? Focus on a result like that. And a lot of people start their resume by saying, my objectives. I've done that. My objective. And I would always tailor my objective to make it sound like something that would go along with what the company was. Most of the time, the company is not overly concerned with your objective. The company is concerned with filling their particular need. So I recommend when going through this, just omit your objectives. That's not really at the top of their list of what they're looking for. Let's see how we can meet your objectives. Leave that out. And please, above all things, have zero tolerance for typos. If I'm reading your resume and I've never met you, I don't know how detailed you are, and if you cannot write a good resume, if you don't know where to put a comma, if you misspell words, that's a problem. I know that you're not paying attention, or that you're not detail oriented, and if you're going to make a mistake on a 1-page resume, what are you going to do to my network? So please, you read it, have maybe another person or two read it, but have absolutely zero tolerance for typos. That can sink the ship really quick. And I want you to highlight your top certifications. Here's what I've seen on resumes. Somebody will have, and I used to do this. I was guilty of this too. Because I'd done a lot of training in the early days with Unix, and I did a bunch of stuff with AT&T, and I'd put all that stuff on there. My prospective employer didn't care about that. Highlight your top certifications. For example, if you've got your CCIE, as some of our students here today say that they're going to be going after, if you've got your CCIE, definitely put that on your resume. They want to know about that. But don't put A+. If you've got your CompTIA A+ certification and you've got your CCA, leave out the A+, only highlight your top certifications is my recommendation. Now let's say you created this awesome resume, you made it through the first gauntlet, you're ready to move on to the interview, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person. A lot of phone interviews you couldn't really connect with people because you couldn't see one another. But that's getting a little bit better with Zoom interviews. But if you can have an in-person interview, that's really the best. And here are my interview tips. Number one, establish rapport with your interviewer. And when I say establish rapport, you want to do this subtly. This is something that Tony Robbins teaches. He points out that if you want to establish rapport with someone, he says that we tend to like people that are like us. So if somebody has a fairly slow pace in their speech, you respond with a fairly slow pace in your speech. If somebody's talking really, really quickly like this, then when you answer the question, you're going to respond really, really quickly like that. And if they're kind of leaning forward, don't make it obvious, but you might kind of lean forward. Now, here's the true story. I was interviewing to be the IT person for one of the big accounting firms many years ago. And I had an interview with the guy that had a very noticeable behavior. He would make a statement or ask a question, I kid you not, and he would violently shake his head up and down. He would say something, and he would do that. Very unique. And I thought, okay, Tony Robbins says to match and mirror their behavior, so I did it. I would answer his question, and I would say, like that. He didn't seem to catch on that I was mocking him or anything like that, but we built that rapport and they offered me the job. Now, we couldn't agree on price, but I really made an impact on him, so much so that even after I turned down the job, they called me back about a week or two later and they said, can you tell us somebody else we might talk to, because we really want somebody like you. I don't think it was because I had an awesome I didn't even have a CCA at the time. But I really think a lot of that was because I established rapport. I matched and mirrored their behavior, their speech patterns, their posture. You can really connect with people a lot more. Now, practice before you do an interview. Practice just in normal social interactions. You don't want your first time practicing this to be in the interview situation. And also, one of the most common questions you get in the interview is, all right, tell us about one of your successes and tell us about, you've heard it, tell us about a time you have failed. Tell us about a time you really messed up. And a lot of people give these very disingenuous answers such as, well, I guess I just care too much. Or I'm just a perfectionist and I just have to make sure that things are right. And I just get really upset when people don't live up to my standards. They try to twist it in a way where they're really bragging on themselves while trying to make it sound like a weakness. That's super transparent. You come off as disingenuous. Don't do that. What I recommend you do instead is be ready with a story or two that you can tell. Tell a story that is a true story of regret and talk about how you have learned from that. I'll give you a personal one. And I used this in an interview one time. They asked where I'd failed. And as a manager, I had criticized one of my employees was not doing what I had asked them to do repeatedly. And I saw them sitting at their desk and this task had not been done. So I came down pretty hard on them. The mistake I made was it was within earshot of some of the other engineers in the office. Oh, I still feel bad about it when I even explain it right now. Now, I learned later when I went to Disney, one of the things they taught us was you praise publicly, you coach privately. I coached publicly, and that was a mistake. So I tell that mistake, a true story of regret, and then I tell them what I did. I said, you know what? I walked across the campus to where this person was finally doing what I'd asked them to do. I apologized to them. and I've never done it since. I learned my lesson, and I tell them that principle. I now know that you that you praise in public, you coach in private. So that's a much more genuine, heartfelt response than I guess I'm just a perfectionist. Don't do that. Come up with a true story of regret. And a lot of times you're going to be asked about, do you have experience with X, some technology perhaps? And maybe you don't. I mean, you're not going to be probably a perfect technical fit for this job. There's going to be technologies that you're going to have to learn. So be ready to bridge to something else that you have done. When I was interviewing at Disney World during the technical interview, that's what happened there. They used... Now, when I interviewed with them, I was an NP. I was not yet an IE, but they were running EIGRP pretty much all over the Disney World property, and they were asking about some fancy EIGRP configuration, which I had not personally done. And I said, no, I haven't done that with EIGRP, but that reminds me of how we did load distribution with BGP with a couple of internet service providers. So I had a story ready that I could bridge to. I said, well, while I haven't done that specifically, that's very similar to this other thing I did do. And then I explained it with great technical detail. I showed that I had deep domain expertise in BGP, and I've already said, oh yeah, that's similar to what you need. So be ready to bridge to a story where you show that you do have deep domain expertise in some area. And those are a few of my recommended strategies for landing your dream job. Let's continue now by talking about how do we get experience. I mentioned earlier, that's the big paradox, where how do you get experience without a job, and how do you get a job without experience? Well, one thing I would suggest is that we might volunteer. I mean, not many organizations are going to turn down your network consulting services. For example, I volunteered for, not for a career thing, just because something I want to do, but I'm like the networking guy at my local church. I set up their like 9 wireless access points and the network controller and the switches and the router and all that stuff. And yeah, I do the troubleshooting for them. So I volunteer, and I could put it on my resume if I were looking for a job. I could say I'm the like lead network engineer at Eastside Community Church as an example, and that would be a bullet point on my resume. Or you might find some other charitable organization in your area that would welcome free IT help. They don't want to hire an IT staff. If you can come in there and you can maybe somewhat learn on their equipment while giving them that free service, that's awesome. They'll probably be all over that. Or you may want to start your own IT consulting company. And it kind of blows a lot of people's minds when I say that. You mean my career is not necessarily working for a big organization? Maybe not. But here's the thing. Even if you don't create your own company and that's your lifetime career, by creating your own company, you can give your own self experience. That's how you can get experience. Yeah, I was the CEO of my own company or president of my own company, and here's an example of some of the projects we did. So suddenly, without working for anybody else except some projects, and those could be volunteer projects, by the way, you've got experience. So you could do it on the side while you still have your full-time job as a side hustle. And just for fun, I threw in a picture. Yes, that is me. I think this is around 1994, 95. I think this is around 1995. I created my own IT consulting company where I did video training back then. And it was on VHS tape to show you how ancient I am. But I'm at an industry trade show there, just one of the little local trade shows. And I've got a little booth set up, and I love it. I was selling my training video for $39, and notice my big bonus. I said, free fonts if you buy my VHS for my video training where I'm teaching like WordPerfect or something. But I started that little side hustle while I was still fully employed as a network administrator at a university, or you may want to do it full time. And if you do want to do it full time, you don't have to do it for your life. You could do it for a season of your life and see if you want to do it long term. But let me give you a huge caution right now. I see this all the time. A lot of people that form businesses, and I think this is one of the main reasons that businesses fail. A lot of people have this impression. They think, I'm good at X. Maybe I'm good at working on cars, which I'm not, by the way. So let's say I'm good at working on cars. That means I could have a successful business by working on cars. That's not necessarily true. In fact, usually that's not true. So many people think that a skill that they have or a hobby or an interest immediately translates into a business, but they forget about the business. There's a lot that goes in to running a business. You have to legally form your business. You've got to somehow market and get customers. You've got to manage your projects where things don't get lost. You've got to just operate your business. You got to do your taxes. You got to do your accounting. Now, let me give you a book recommendation on this. This book that I'm going to show you, I checked last night. Unfortunately, it's not available. It's out of print. It's not available on Amazon.com, but there's a bunch of them available on eBay. They're probably used, but you might want to go pick one of these up on eBay. It's older, but the principles still apply today. It's called From Serf, like the old English castle servants, the serfs, From Serf to Surfer, where you're like surfing the internet. This is a guide to becoming a network consultant. And yes, some of the references and examples they'll give, it'll be on they'll mention like Microsoft Windows NT instead of one of the current version of Windows Server. But the principles are still the same. I love this book. I don't even know how many times I've read this. One time I was trying to find it and I seemed to have lost it. I bought it again. I later found the other one. I've got 2 copies of this book right now. I love it. Again, it's not in print currently. You can pick one up on eBay, but it just gives you some great insight and motivation about starting your own IT consulting business. Now, first of all, disclaimer, I'm not giving legal advice here. I don't have credentials to give you legal advice. But one of the things you'll want to talk with your legal professional about, and this might vary depending on what country you're in, is how you want to legally structure your business. In the U.S., again, disclaimer, I'm not an authority on this, but this is my understanding. You could be a sole proprietor. You could do it in your own name, like Kevin Wallace Training, or you could come up with another name and file a DBA, a doing business as. And the downside or the risk here is you're liable. If you go try to fix somebody's network and you like break something or you really mess their network up, you delete their database, you're liable personally for that. With a partnership, that's where maybe you combine resources with somebody else that has another set of skills that would work nicely with you. But that's really like a multi-person sole proprietorship. You're still liable personally. So what a lot of people do, and this is what I initially did with my current company, is I formed an LLC, a limited liability company. Here, that gives you personally some legal protection. Your business is technically a different entity. But if you're the only owner, you don't have employees, well, even if you do have employees sometimes, you don't even have to file a separate tax return. It just goes through your own personal tax return. Now, what I do now is I'm structured as an LLC, but my taxes are filed as an S Corp, an S Corporation. They're similar to LLCs, but they've got some additional tax advantages. So I file 2 sets of taxes right now. And that would be another recommendation. Get a CPA. This is way beyond my expertise. Rely on other professionals. I got with a lawyer when structuring and forming my business. And now I have a CPA that does my taxes. And when you get really big, you might want to consider a C corporation. But one of the big challenges is getting customers to come into your business. One of the biggest ones is word of mouth, though. I mean, a lot of people out there don't have an IT staff, but they have IT needs. I mean, they have computers, but they don't want to hire somebody to maintain those. You could just be in a business. Oh, I noticed you have some Cisco IP phones right there. I know how to set up a call manager. You want me to install the next phone you have, next phone you add on? You want to put me on a retainer to just maintain your network month to month? just have some conversations. Let your friends and family know that that you're doing networking, or go to one of those trade shows. The picture I showed you from back in the mid '90s. Yeah, from going to that, I think it might have been that trade show. I got a couple of jobs from that. I got a speaking engagement. A college professor wanted me to come speak to their class. Somebody else wanted me to come and set up some equipment for their business, so I did that. Just word of mouth. Somebody that owned like a big like petroleum company, they got me to come in there and set up their network. Yeah, just word of mouth is huge. Something else you could do is partner with another company, that not a competing company, but let's say you want to do network consulting. You could partner with a builder, because they probably don't have expertise in networking, but as they're building homes, they need to know how to run wires in those homes and how to best position that for a wired home. True story. My oldest daughter and her husband, they're currently buying a house that's being built. So it's a really exciting time. We went over there the other night. They don't even have the drywall up yet. The studs are up, and I'm looking around and I notice, hey, they got some Cat 5e wire in here. That's cool. The builder put in the Cat 5e wire. So I'm tracing, okay, we got one in this bedroom, in the living room, these other bedrooms. Where's it go? Where are we going to put the wiring closet for this thing? You know what they did with the Cat 5e wire? It just ran outside the brick wall and they just cut it off. Are they going to put an Ethernet hub mounted out in the freezing cold on the outside of a building? I don't know what they were thinking, but they knew, yeah, we should wire this, but they really didn't know what they were doing, I don't think. Yeah, partner with somebody like that as an example, and you can find some gigs, or in other words, jobs on Upwork. You're going to love this. Let me take you out to Upwork really quick if you've not played with that. You can get some very just projects or temporary jobs on Upwork. Let's go over here for a second. On Upwork, let's say that you want to just almost like put out your resume and say, I do network engineering and here's my rate and here's my experience. So under talent, you could say, I want to list myself, or if you're looking for talent, you could say, I want to look for a network engineer. And let's see some people that already have theirs out there. Let's see, here's somebody from Virginia. They charge $95 an hour for, I guess, network design. Somebody does wireless engineering for $54 an hour, just on and on. What you could do is you could put yourself out here, list your accomplishments, your certifications, have a competitive rate, maybe so you get chosen. Something else you could do if you're looking for a specific job. Let's go back to the main page here. Under search, let's search for jobs. These could be very temporary project-based jobs. Let's say somebody needs a job with, they need a CCNP for a job. So I'll just put in CCNP. And look at this, a duration of less than a month. Here's a project. You're going to work less than 30 hours a week. You're going to do this less than a month. They're going to pay you as much as $125 an hour for this job. Yeah, that's a great way to bring in, and a lot of this can be done remotely, by the way. That's a great way to bring in business to your self-employed network consulting business. There are just so many opportunities out there. I hope I'm getting you excited about the opportunities that really do exist out there today. Now, let me give you some recommendations for software. I mentioned project management. I don't want to go into how to operate pieces of software. I'll just say what we use personally with our company. For project management, we use Asana. So I can assign, we've got different projects, and I can assign tasks in those projects to Charles and assign due dates, and I can assign stuff to myself, and we can see how things are coming along. So Asana is great for that. For accounting, yes, I have a CPA that does my taxes, but weekly I have to keep up with doing my bookkeeping, and I use QuickBooks for that. So those would be my recommendations. So those are some thoughts about how do you get experience without having a job. Again, you could volunteer, or you could start your own IT consulting company, whether that's as a side hustle or whether that's full-time. Next up, let's consider some exam preparation strategies. Hopefully you understand the importance of having certifications as a way to not only develop your own skills and be better in your job, but also to make you stand out to potential employers where, yeah, if you've got a CCIA in collaboration, they know that, okay, you've got at least this level of knowledge. So let's talk about how you can go about studying, because sometimes people just go all over the place. They're not organized about it. Let me break it down. Here's how I recommend people study for these exams. I recommend that they do three things. Three simple things. Number one, get to know what's on the exam. Know what topics you're really trying to learn. Number two, schedule. Don't have the intent, but actually schedule your study time and get your hands dirty. And by that I mean get some hands-on experience. And just as an example, let's take CCNA. I mean, that's like the core Cisco exam that people get started out with. If you're getting into Cisco, yeah, you probably want to get that CCNA exam. So let's pretend that we're going to go after that one. And we want to schedule, or we want to set up our study plan for CCNA. Well, number one, we want to see what's on the exam. And Cisco gives us a blueprint for the topics on the different exams. In fact, I created a shortcut link, kwtrain.com/200-301. That'll give you a link for, it's just a shortcut link to the PDF that Cisco has for their exam topics. And at a high level, there's how the different topics break down. What I recommend you do is before you start your study, print that out and go through each of the topics. And if you think you've already pretty good on a topic, I mean, you know how to do subnetting perhaps, you can check that off. Yeah, I think I'm pretty good there. If there's something you have no clue about, like Ansible and Puppet and Chef, you think, I don't even know what that is. You might put an X there. And you're going to save that, and you're going to go back to that list after you complete your study and see, are those weak areas still weak areas? Do you have any remaining weak areas that you need to focus on? And then it's not enough to say, I intend to study OSPF on Wednesday. Or just I'm going to study OSPF this week. Well, the end of the week comes and you still haven't studied OSPF. So I want you to actually put this on your calendar. I always say what gets scheduled gets done. So as an example, your mileage may vary, but as an example, I might think personally, I could probably squeeze out 8 hours a week for study, but that's not enough. I want you to be more specific. Where do those 8 hours come from? Well, I could probably get up an hour early every day, Monday through Friday before work, and I could spend an hour before work every day studying, I think, and labbing. Maybe on Saturday, family sleeps in a little bit. I could get up early on Saturday. I could probably get 3 hours in Saturday morning before the family gets going. Grand total, that's going to give me my 8 hours per week. Awesome. The next question is, how long is it going to take me to do the study? Well, if you have our CCNA video training series, I think it's around maybe 18 to 20 hours, something like that. You'll probably want to watch that, and more than just watching it straight through, you'll pause, you'll take some notes. It might take you 40 hours to get through that training series. So 40 hours of video, and again, this is an estimate. I'm going to be giving you throughout that CCNA course, I'm going to be giving you lots of labs to do on Packet Tracer. I show you how to download Packet Tracer. We give you those videos showing you the lab tasks. So we get you to do that. Maybe you spend 20 hours doing that. And you've gone back, you've identified those weak spots and you want to dive deeper there. You redo a lab, you watch the videos over again. Maybe you get online and try to Google it and look at some of the Cisco docs for it. But grand total estimate, I could get ready in 72 hours. And I've already said I could study 8 hours per week. So let's do the math. If I'm studying 8 hours a week and it's going to take me 72 hours, that means I could be ready for this exam in 9 weeks. And finally, let's see how we can get our hands dirty. And by this, I mean, let's get some hands-on practice. Even though a lot of the Cisco exams today may not have simulations like they used to, maybe because those simulations had a lot of issues, it still is, I would say, necessary to know how to do the configuration to still answer the questions that you do have. And especially when you get on the job, you don't want to just have book knowledge. You want to have done this when you show up on the job. And for CCNA, I think Cisco Packet Tracer is all you need for hands-on experience. And I give my students a shortcut link, kwtraining.com/PT, that redirects you to the Cisco Packet Tracer site. You can download it for free. And then we give you the files to load in and the videos, and we give you our lab assignments throughout that course. So again, you could use something like Packet Tracer, which is a simulator. You could use some equipment at your company that's non-production equipment. When I was going after one of my CCAs, that's what I did. I used some equipment from actually my former employer. The guy that took my job, he was able to loan me some equipment from the company, and I set up a home lab, and I gave it back afterwards. But yeah, maybe you, with your director's approval, you could use some equipment from your company that's not currently in service. You might buy a home lab. I've done this as well. I've gone out to eBay and bought routers and switches and IP phones, and that can be expensive. For when I got my voice certification, or CCA, which is now collaboration, I spent about $10,000 to build a home lab. And you might say, whoa, that's crazy. $10,000, that's a huge investment. Here's the thing though. When I did this for my route switch and for my voice CCA, after I passed the labs, I just turned around and sold the equipment. Almost all the money that I paid, I got back. Big resale value. So in the end, it cost me very, very little to have a full-blown home lab. You might want to consider that. You could use an emulator. Now that's going to emulate Cisco iOS, and that's the prime example of that is Cisco's CML, the Cisco Modeling Labs. Or we've talked about a simulator. It's not really running Cisco iOS, but it really seems like it's running Cisco iOS. Yeah, Packet Tracer is an example of that. So again, the big 3 things you want to do for studying: get to know what's on the exam, and schedule your study time, put it on your calendar. I actually did this when I was going after my last CCA. I put a lot of time in on that. I put in, my rough guess is it took about 1,600 hours of study to get that certification. And from October of 2011 until the end of March 2012, I studied every day. I'm not kidding. Well, one day I took Christmas off. Every other day I was labbing, I was reading, I was studying, I was doing something to get ready for that lab. Even after 1,600 hours of study, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my professional career. That was a super, super difficult lab. But yeah, schedule your study time. Actually put it on my calendar. I'm going to do an 8-hour lab on Saturday. I'm going to do 3 hours of EIGRP setup, or not EIGRP, but maybe I'm going to set up call center on Thursday. And finally, in this particular section, I want to give you some strategies for what you do on exam day. I don't know about you, but I'm a nervous test taker. I mean, my stomach can get really torn up if I'm nervous about an exam. Let me give you some strategies that I've used that work for me. Try them out for yourself. Number 1 is arrive at the exam facility early, where you're going to be taking the exam. Now, today, you have the option oftentimes of not just going to a brick and mortar place where you take an exam in a building. You can take it from your home or your office. So arrive early, and I would also say sign in early. If you're taking it remotely, which is now my personal preference, you've got stuff to do. You've got to take a picture of your ID. You've got to take pictures of your room all around your computer. You've got to upload those. You've got to talk to the monitor or the proctor that's going to be watching you. You got stuff to do. So show up 15, 20 minutes early, get all that taken care of. And you might run into traffic if you're going to an actual facility. I don't want you to be stressed out because you're trying to get there on time and you're cutting it too close. Arrive early. And then when you get there, don't sit in your car and look over your notes. A lot of people do that. Here's what I've done. I realize that if I look over my notes last minute, I'll realize, oh, I'm not perfectly clear on this. I don't completely remember this. I'll start questioning myself. Here's my thought. If you're in the parking lot, you should be ready for the exam. A few more minutes of looking at your notes should not make an impact, except it could have a negative impact. Do not review your notes. Just take some deep breaths, get calm, and when the exam starts, determine your required pace. For example, let's say that we've got 60 questions on our exam, and we've got 90 minutes. Now, some questions are really short. It's a quick multiple choice, boom, you're done. The other one, you might have to read lots of exhibits and look at some configuration output, look at a topology. It might take a lot longer to do those questions. But on average, you want to see about how many questions you should be doing in a certain amount of time. So I would check in about 1/3 of the way through. I mean, if it's a 90-minute exam, you got 60 questions. When you're 1/3, when you're 30 minutes into that exam, spot check where you are. You should be at least on question 40, if not, or excuse me, on question 20, because that's 1/3 of the questions. If you're on question 15, you need to pick up the pace. It's a really bad feeling to get to the end of the exam and have unanswered questions. That will kill your score. So just periodically check, not every minute, but maybe every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes. Just see if you need to adjust your pace. And I want you to begin with confidence. And I used to have a strategy where I watched the Olympics years ago, and there was a U.S. Olympics speed skater named Apollo Ono. And I noticed that before he skated, he was out on the ice and he yawned. I mean, literally like that. He would take a yawn, and I'm thinking, you're in the Olympics. Are you bored? Why are you yawning? And one of the announcers explained what was going on with Apollo. He said that he did that to calm his nerves. And I thought, I wonder if that would work for a Cisco exam. And I tried it. So I would literally yawn in the exam room before getting started to try to calm my nerves a little bit, there was some measurable benefit from that. Here's something that's even better that I've noticed. I've read a book recently, or I've got a book, and I watched. There's also a TED Talk on it. It's from a Harvard professor named Amy Cuddy. She wrote this book called Presence. And in the book called Presence, she talks about the concept of having a power pose, where you might stand like Superman or Wonder Woman with, let me see if I can demonstrate this without knocking a bunch of stuff down. But literally, you're standing up, you've got your hands on your hips, you look up, and no kidding, you put a big silly grin on your face. Hoping nobody takes a screen cap of that, makes a meme out of it. But you're going to have this big silly grin on your face, and you keep that position, that pose, for 2 minutes. And there's studies at Harvard shows that it will increase testosterone in both men and women, which is going to give you more confidence. It's going to make you more apt to go ahead and answer, to take a risk and answer the question. It's going to lower your cortisol, which is the chemical that makes you more nervous. So it's going to make you more confident. It's going to help you show up as your best self. Now, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you know OSPF, but it's going to help bring out the best in you. And those are my recommendations for preparing for a Cisco exam, or really any exam. Next up, I want to talk to you about time management. We can have all these great intentions to do things, but life can get in the way. How do you stay organized with your time? Well, I want you to be a mad scientist. And what I mean by this is I want you to experiment with different time management strategies. I've been doing this for years. And for a while, I'll do one thing and it's great, or it suddenly gets kind of routine and old for me, and I'll go try something else. So feel free to experiment, to play around with this a little bit. For example, one technique, and there's a bunch of them, but just as one super popular example is the Pomodoro technique. Now, Pomodoro, that's Italian for tomato. It's like one of those tomato timers. That's where the name comes from. And the idea is, if you need to get something done, and I've done this many times, I've got a Pomodoro app on my computer. But if you want to get something done and you really need to focus, what you do is you set a timer. It could be on, you could set it on your phone, for example, but you set a timer and you focus for 25 minutes without interruption. You don't take calls, you don't check email, you don't look at texts. You focus for 25 minutes. Then you take a break for 5 minutes. Take a short break, maybe get up, walk around, get a drink of water, whatever you need to do. Get at it again. Go for another 25 minutes. You repeat that cycle 3 times. Then you take a longer break. You might take a 20, 25 minute break, but you have put some intense focus for 75 minutes at this point. You have accomplished a lot without distraction. So that's one technique. If I really, really need to focus, that's one of the common techniques that I'll reach for. But a lot of our time management is just good old making to-do lists. And you can do this on paper, but there are so many different apps for setting up these to-do lists and managing your projects. Let me give you the best apps that I would recommend you look at for 2022. And these are all ones that I've tried. These are, and I've rated them in order of preference. My favorite time management to-do list app is, and some of these may be available for iPhone and Android or web-based or Windows or Microsoft Windows or Mac OS. It just varies. You can check on that. But I'm sort of Mac-centric and I've got an iPhone, and I use the Things app. It's currently version Things 3. This is my absolute favorite to-do list app. It just, the UI, the user interface just feels good. In addition to my to-dos, it's got that inbox where I can dump everything on Sunday and then I can start assigning it. It allows me to set up my recurring events. It allows me to do some project management as well. In fact, after class today, I said I was going to go in and take, for those of you that are joining us live, this is not the case for those of you watching on replay, but for those of you joining us live, you know, I was talking about something that I would give you if you did something within the webinar. And yeah, I've got it on my Things timer or my Things app to go remove those items after the webcast today. So Things, I love it. The second one is from Moleskine. It's Moleskine Journey. I wish this was better. I want to love this product. I've tried to break away from Things and go to Moleskine 2 or 3 times, and I always go back to Things because as much potential as it has, because it's a to-do list manager, it's a project manager, it's a journal, it's a habit tracker. There are lots of things that it can do, and I want to love it, but it's just not there. The UI doesn't feel just right. Things are not spaced just right. And it doesn't work just right. I'll be going along for a week and then suddenly I've got like 50 to-dos show up out of nowhere that are just like things that I've already deleted, and they're not synchronizing between my phone and my computer, and it's just a little buggy, I would say, is my experience. So as much as I want to love it, I always keep going back to Things. Now, Microsoft To Do, they've got a nice little app. I think it's great. It does what a basic to-do list app would do. One of my big things with that is with my Apple Watch, I've got a little complication that tells me like the next thing on my to-do list. And the app for the iPhone, it doesn't show up on the watch. So I don't have, with Things and with Moleskine, I can see my next to-do thing on my watch. I cannot do that with Microsoft To Do, which is why it's ranked number 3. But if you work in a very Microsoft-centric environment, it might be a good one for you. Other ones that are popular that I've tried include things like AnyDo and Todoist. I'd rate those pretty much equal. They do pretty much what you think they would do. You can create headings and subheadings and bullet lists and things like that. They're good. I don't get too excited about them. If you're very Google-centric, there's Google Tasks. I don't have any major qualms with that one, except it doesn't really work with the watch and everything that I like it to work with for me personally. Number 7, I've worked with this one as well, OmniFocus. Now I'll tell you, this OmniFocus is by far the most powerful, and this can do the most things out of any of these apps. It is super complicated. I mean, if I had a life that was that complicated that I needed OmniFocus, I'd lose my mind. I cannot imagine needing everything that OmniFocus does. And it is so jam-packed with features, it's hard for me just to do my daily stuff. I'm sure with enough training, I could figure it out and streamline it, but I just love Things. That's kind of what I stick with. So as we're wrapping up this module, I'd love to know, what do you use? Do you have any recommendations for time management? Maybe you use, sometimes I use the paper, like the high performance planner. Tell me what you use for your to-do list. Maybe it's a sticky note and a pen. Go ahead and chat that in if you would. All right. Next up, let's talk about what technologies are most in demand today. And if you're watching this on replay, this is being done in late 2021, about to go, and we're thinking into 2022. So we want to think about what certs are most in demand, what skills are most in demand. And I'm going to just kind of give you a sampling. I'm going to teach you. I'm not trying to teach you comprehensively any of these, but I want to give you a taste. Like, hey, take a taste of automation. Take a taste of cybersecurity. So I'm actually going to teach a little technical content in this section. But here's what we know about the most in-demand skills for 2021, and this comes to us through CompTIA, so very reliable source. The 17 most in-demand skills. Check out that list. Now, some of those don't necessarily play into something that I would be a part of. I would probably not know much about machine learning or artificial intelligence, but some of those I think, oh yeah, I could learn about that. Now, for the top IT certs that are in demand in 2021, this comes from CIO, the Chief Information Officer magazine, and we see a list ranked 1 through 15 of the most in-demand certs. Now, let's look at some commonalities here. But first, we talk a lot about Cisco. Notice where the Cisco certs rank. They're kind of clumped together there. I didn't highlight it, but CCA is at number 8. CCNA is at number 9. CCNP is at number 10. There's a lot of stuff that's rated higher than Cisco certs. Times are changing, folks. For example, one of the big ones is cloud computing. That we talked earlier about during some of our breaks about Anthony's AWS course. Yeah, that is the most in-demand certification for 2021. AWS Solutions Architect Professional. And Anthony's course that we talked about, it helped you get fully those first 2 certs, and then it laid the foundation for this professional cert. Another big one is cybersecurity. And right now, what Charles and I have been working on, we've been working on developing the Certified Ethical Hacker Training, and that ranks number 5. That cert ranks above all of the Cisco certs that are out there in terms of demand. Another big one is automation that's out there. So I thought what we do for just a few minutes today is let me give you a sampling of some of these different, just a couple of these different technologies to see if it might be for you, or maybe it's not for you. Let me give you a sampling from our CEH curriculum where I'm teaching how to do a Mac overflow attack, to launch a man-in-the-middle attack. So when we talk about cybersecurity, this is a teeny tiny example of the thing you're going to be learning. But a man-in-the-middle attack is where we've got something like, here's a very small Cisco Catalyst switch. And with the switch, we know how that works. We plug in devices to the different ports, and they learn the MAC address of the device. So when a frame comes in destined for a certain MAC address, well, hopefully the switch has already learned, oh yeah, we learned that MAC address lives off of port 7. It's in its MAC address table, or sometimes we call it the CAM table. But that MAC address table is going to have this big listing of here are the ports, and here are the MAC addresses that live off of those ports. And if I've got another switch connected to port 1, and I got a bunch of PCs connected to that switch, all those MAC addresses from all those switches, they're going to be learned on this port. A lot of people get thrown in and say, whoa, we can learn more than one MAC address on a port? Oh yeah, you can learn thousands of MAC addresses on a single port. But normally, if an attacker came along and they wanted to eavesdrop in, they wanted to run something like Wireshark and capture packets going back and forth, they wouldn't be able to do that because the switch is only going to be sending traffic to out the port associated with that MAC address. Now, there are different ways that they could launch this man-in-the-middle or an on-path attack. One way that I'm going to show you is called a MAC overflow, where we could, or the attacker could overflow the MAC address table of this switch. This particular switch that I showed you, it holds a little over 8,000 MAC addresses, and then it's full. So let's imagine that the MAC address table or the CAM table on this switch is completely at capacity, and we plug in a new device. Is that device's MAC address going to be learned by the switch? No, it's not, because the MAC address table is full. So when traffic is going to that new device, where does it get sent? it gets flooded out of all ports other than the port that the frame was received on, because the switch doesn't know where that MAC address lives. So one of the ports it's going to flood it out of is the port connected to the attacker. Different ways of doing that, or different ways of launching the man in the middle. But here's how an attacker could launch this MAC overflow attack. If we're running something like Kali Linux, there is a utility called MacOf. It's MacOf. For MAC address, OF is for overflow. We're overflowing the MAC address table. The idea is the attacker is going to send in a series of frames to a switch port, and each of those frames are going to claim to be from a different MAC address. It's very easy to spoof or to lie about the MAC address that you're sending from. So it just sort of randomizes the MAC address, and it sends frame after frame after frame. It can send thousands of frames in just a couple of seconds. So here, if you notice on screen, I'm running this utility, and it is just sending all these different MAC addresses into that same switch port. And when we're done, I took a screen cap of the terminal connected to that switch, and it said, yeah, we've got room for 8,170 MAC addresses. But that's how many we've already learned. The static MAC address count, or rather the MAC address space available, 0. So a newly attached device, traffic going to that, it's going to be flooded out everywhere, including going to the attacker. And we talk about in our cybersecurity courses how to prevent and defend against that. That's just one of the topics in CEH. Let's do one more. Let's talk about automation for a moment, shall we? I remember a few years ago, I think it was 2016, I believe. I was at Cisco Live, and I was at this CCIA NetVet gathering, and so this is a picture I took of Chuck Robbins, who was speaking at that time. And Chuck Robbins was talking about the head of Cisco, if you're not familiar, took over from John Chambers. He talked about the concept of a hybrid engineer. You see, the paradigm of the future is, instead of going in and going to the command line interface and configuring everything like interface gig 0/2, no shutdown, IP address, and doing all that manually, we can now do something called intent-based networking. We express our intent. What do we want to be configured? And that information can be pushed out from a network controller to tons of devices all at once. So we can now have programs go out and express our intent through the program, and then the controller sends out appropriate commands to reconfigure the networking equipment to conform to our intent. In order to do that, we need a couple of skill sets. We need both CLI, traditional command line interface skill sets, and programming skills. And Chuck Robbins back then, he talked about the hybrid engineer. He said, showing this Venn diagram, the overlapping area that was really in demand was going to be this hybrid engineer that had some skill sets in each arena. And I still think that there's a lot of validity to that, but he changed the message a couple of years later. It became pretty obvious quickly that you could go really, really, really deep into programming. You can even there's some advanced certifications just in network programmability now. So if you go deep into that, you might not be able to go deep into CLI skills. When you talk about different learning patterns, you might hear about the T pattern. The T is you've got some knowledge of a little bit of knowledge of a lot of things, but you have deep knowledge of one thing, like you've got this one stem coming off. People talk about Elon Musk as having like a pie learning pattern where he's got a lot of knowledge about a few things, but then he's got like electric cars, and then he's got like space, and so you've got two. It kind of makes the symbol of pi. So he's got a couple of areas of deep domain expertise. Most of us are not Elon Musk. Most of us probably, or I'll say I'm probably going to focus primarily on one of those areas. So he's now talking about something called the Dream Team instead of the hybrid engineer. The Dream Team, as he calls it, is made up of people that are great CLI configurators, if that's a word. And they're also partnering with those programmers. It's called the DevOps lifecycle, where you've got developers and network operations people working together. That's where the term DevOps comes from, developers and network operations. But even if we're just in the networking realm, we still have to have a conversational knowledge about software-defined networking. So let me give you a quick overview. First, realize that when we're looking at these traditional networking appliances on screen, like routers and switches, they have three different planes of operation: the data plane, the control plane, and the management plane. Now let's go through these. The management plane, that's how you and I connect to those devices to administer those devices. I almost said we would telnet in. Don't telnet. We would secure shell into those devices, and we would give our commands. And we would configure that appliance, that router, that switch, that firewall. That's where we connect in. Now, the control plane is responsible for running applications, for lack of a better word. For example, with OSPF, we're running the Dijkstra algorithm to calculate the best path to get from point A to point B. Well, that algorithm would be executed in the control plane. On a switch, we're running the spanning tree protocol. That algorithm would be executed in the control plane. And that control plane is going to then populate our routing table, or what we call the FIB oftentimes, the forwarding information base in a router, or the MAC or the CAM table in a switch. And the data plane is concerned with speed. It's concerned with getting traffic in a frame or a packet in on one port and getting it out of the egress port as quickly as possible. And it's going to reference some sort of a routing table or a MAC address table to make that decision. And that was created by the control plane. That's the way things have worked for decades. But now, with software-defined networking, we can mix things up a bit. So I got some terms I want you to understand. The first one, that what I've just described, is called a distributed control plane. In other words, the control plane lives in every single device. It's distributed across all of our devices. But let's say that we add in a software-defined networking or an SDN controller. Now, this controller is where we can express our intent about what we want to happen on the network. I want to protect voice and video traffic. I want to give low priority traffic to network gaming. I want to give high priority traffic to our e-commerce, things like that. That might be an intent that we have. But notice what happened in the animation. The control planes went to live in the controller. So now, not everybody does this. Cisco doesn't do this with all their controllers, but in general, we think about with SDN, the control plane's going to live on the network controller, and it runs those algorithms, and it comes up with the routing table and the MAC address table, and then it can inform the switches about, all right, here's how to populate your FIB, here's how to populate your CAM, but the heavy lifting is done by the controller itself. And we're going to communicate down to those devices using something called an API. That's an application programming interface. An API is basically how one piece of software talks to another piece of software. So we're going to have an API talking from the controller down to the device that's going to be configured. And we refer to these as southbound interfaces, because if you think of a network compass, or not a network compass, but just a compass that you would use like out in the woods, south is typically down. Well, we typically draw SDN networks like this, and the devices that are being controlled, they live below or south, if you will, of the network controller. So, we call those southbound interfaces, or SBIs for short. And what we've described here is no longer a distributed control plane, it is a centralized control plane, because those algorithms are being executed in the SDN controller. Well, the next logical question is, how does that SDN controller know what our intent is? How do we express our intent? We do that through applications. Oh, by the way, let me give you a quick example of a fairly generic southbound interface. What protocol are we using? What language of love are we using to speak from the controller down to the routers and the switches on those southbound interfaces? Different options. One of them you hear a lot about, an industry standard, is called OpenFlow. So if you hear OpenFlow, that's an example of a southbound API. But back to our story. The way we express our intent is through an application. Now, sometimes these applications live on the controller itself. Cisco has a controller called Cisco DNA Center, and it has a bunch of applications built into DNA Center. and we can run those applications directly on the box. Other times, we're going to have programs, typically written in Python, by the way. If you're going to learn a programming language, I recommend Python be the first one you learn. But typically written in Python, we can have these scripts that are going to send our intent down to the controller. And there are going to be APIs on that controller that allow us to do different things. There might be an API that lets us set up OSPF on a router. There might be an API that lets us set up Ether channel on a switch, and lots of other things. But we can send instructions down to that SDN controller. And because we're coming from the application and the application is above the SDN controller, that's called, you guessed it, a northbound interface or an NBI, because the applications are north of the controller itself. And when we're sending our instructions from the application down to the controller, realizing the application might actually be on the controller, but here's the logical flow. As we're going from the application down to the controller, we're using something called RESTful APIs, or some people just call them REST APIs. REST, that stands for Representational State Transfer. What that means is we're giving instructions using HTTP verbs. Like when you go to a website, if you're pulling something down from a website, you're using maybe the GET HTTP verb. If you're posting or updating something to a website, you might be using the post verb. You might use the delete verb to delete something on that site. Well, those verbs, those HTTP verbs, are going to be used to send those instructions to the APIs that live on the controller. And when we send those instructions down to the controller, they have to be in a certain format. A couple of common formats. One is XML, Extensible Markup Language. Another format is JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. This has been a sample taste of network automation and a sample taste of cybersecurity. And as we think about, and I'll give you another look at this now, if you want to take a screenshot, as you take a look at these most in-demand skills for IT and the most in-demand certifications for IT, we had somebody early on, one of our live students said that they want to go after their CCA. I think that is a very worthy goal. I've got two. I don't regret either one of them. But before you embark on some of these certifications, some of them are more complex, are going to put an impact on your life. Make sure you're willing to make that sacrifice. I've seen people that think they'll make the sacrifice. They'll sacrifice a bunch. They'll fail once or twice, and they give up. And they then just they never get it. They never reach their goal. Now, they learned a lot. I'll give you that. They learned a lot as they were preparing, but they really impacted their life. So be ready to see it through to the conclusion. When I got my first CCA, I failed the first 2 times. It was my 3rd attempt when I finally got it. When I got my voice CCA, it was my 2nd attempt. So I've taken the CCI lab 5 times, and I have failed 3 of those 5 times. So I want you to be sure that you know what you're getting into, and it's going to put a major impact on your life. It could be very positive for your career, but it will impact like your relationships, your free time, possibly your health, possibly your mental health. Here's what I tell people that I'm counseling on things like this, giving career advice. This is not your goal, my friends. You do not want to come to the end of your life and your epitaph, your tombstone says, "Here lies," insert your name here, "they were a double CCA." Well, that's really not what life is about. So as you're making these decisions, yes, do make strategic decisions. Do be aware of what your passions are. Do be aware of what's in demand, but realize there's sacrifices that come along with that. And I don't want you to have an unhappy life, but a bunch of certifications. So it's all a balance. Hope that's been useful to you. So those are some of the most in-demand technologies and certifications for 2021, and I'd say most of those are carrying over into 2022 as well.